Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Scaling District Impacts Through Partnership session today. We are all very excited to have you here. Locally led conservation efforts play a significant role in successful and continuous natural resource management across the United States. In this session, led by Field to Market, attendees will learn how conservation districts can partner with non-governmental organizations and members of the supply chain to expand conversations of sustainability and drive adoption practices that address natural resource concerns. Before we get started, just a couple quick housekeeping reminders for everyone. Our presenters are live and they are able to answer questions through the Q&A chat box. So please type any questions you may have into the Q&A chat box. Once the session wraps up, go back out to the agenda and you'll be able to view the next set of sessions and choose where you'd like to go from there. And with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Lexi Clark. Lexi supports the scaling and implementation of Field to Market's Continuous Improvement Accelerator by working with growers in the supply chain to document and demonstrate continuous improvements in environmental outcomes. With more than a decade of experience serving as a soil conservationist for USDA's NRCS, Lexi brings with her a passion for stewardship and depth of experience in conservation practices, focusing on nutrient management and building soil health. Prior to joining Field to Market, she served as a project analyst for subject matter in environmental science for ProSodel. Lexi holds a BA from Mary Baldwin University and an MS in environmental science and engineering from Virginia Tech. And with that, Lexi, I'd like to give you the floor.
Good afternoon, and thank you. I'm excited to present today alongside several of the Field to Market members. Field to Market is a huge consortium of supply chain partners across the entire spectrum of agriculture that are working towards specific sustainability metrics. Each of these 150 members that are on the slide really help us to outline and lead where we're moving in the sustainability conversation across the U.S. agricultural system. Focusing in on key sustainability metrics, Field to Market has developed the industry's most accepted and recognized sustainability measurement framework, providing an analysis across biodiversity, energy use, greenhouse gas emissions, irrigation water use, land use, soil carbon, soil conservation, and water quality. We focus in on the suite of the top commodity crops grown throughout the U.S., from corn grain to soybeans and wheat, all the way through to the cotton belt, potatoes, rice growing regions, as well as sugar beets, sorghum, peanuts, and more importantly, for our new pathways, for working with livestock feed, alfalfa, barley, and corn silage. The Fieldprint Platform is a pioneering assessment framework that empowers brands, retailers, suppliers, and farmers at every stage of their sustainability journey to measure the environmental impacts of commodity crop production and identify opportunities for continuous improvement. This tool allows farmers to voluntarily compare their fields to their peers in a project area through our continuous improvement projects. This also allows them to compare towards state and national averages. Farmers can access this free and confidential tool through our online Fieldprint calculator or through associated precision agricultural platforms. As you see, many of our qualified data management partners are those that are already working with producers. They're the systems that are on the farm. And over the past year, we have worked with over 3.5 million acres. And what that looks like in the number of farmers is around 3,000 farmers that have really come together through the Fieldprint platform to enter their data, whether that's through our calculator online or through the qualified data management partners. And that includes over 75% of those coming from our qualified data management partners. So our goal is that anywhere that a farmer goes to enter data, they have a way to actually connect to Field to Market metrics. The Fieldprint the Field to Market Continuous Improvement Accelerator has really scaled and grown over the past year. We moved from a very simple measurement framework to having 3 pathways that meet farmers and our members where they are in their sustainability journey. Whether you're in incubation, focusing in on those enabling conditions and making sure that producers have what they need to be successful in sustainability adoption through education, through practice implementation support, direct support there around technical assistance. We really lean in on that as that starting point, working with our producers. The Insight, which is our center, our longest standing pathway, that pathway really focuses in on that measurement. You can't manage what you don't measure. So it's really critical that you work at that measurement and taking that measurement and understanding what are the results and how can I make a difference on those results. This is where conservation districts can play an additional technical assistance role, working with our producers that are using the Fieldprint platform to measure their sustainability efforts. And then the last, our innovation pathway, is one that I'm excited today to share with you, because to me, this is the greatest opportunity for our conservation districts. It's not only taking that measurement and understanding where you're starting from in that baseline, but actually starting to measure and drive that impact. So understanding, how do we incentivize the change that we're looking for within the supply chain? How do we bring all of that together? With over 70 active projects and many completed projects on top of that, our members are working across the U.S. to help farmers document and demonstrate their sustainability actions. The pins on this map highlight our active projects across the U.S. However, please note that there are several projects that are underway that are working to get registered, that they're in that design phase where they're pulling those ideas together. So there's always opportunities, no matter where you are. I'm always happy to connect you with potential projects within supply chains in your area. What we have found truly through projects being registered and being transparent about what they're doing on the ground, we've been able to show and demonstrate credible action for sustainable agriculture across our membership and what they focus in on. We have a project directory that publicly shares this information and becomes that clearinghouse for interested stakeholders that wish to better understand what's going on out there. So that really helps us demonstrate that credible action. At the same time, it helps us create a more informed conversation, as well as gaining recognition for sustainability leadership. The biggest reason that Field to Market is in the business is that we want to strengthen that trust in food and in the ag systems. So everything that we can do to be transparent, upfront about the activities of our members across our program, we are looking forward to being able to share that and really celebrate alongside our members. Today, we're going to meet a unique project on the Headwaters Agricultural Sustainability Partnership. And with that project, you'll dive into a case study where you can really see the benefits of these projects across the U.S.
First, we have Leif Fixen, who is the North American Soil Health and Nutrient Strategy Manager for the Nature Conservancy. He leads TNC's Farmer Advisor Strategy, working with ag retailers, consulting agronomists and conservation districts, and university extension to accelerate adoption of conservation practices. In this role, he draws on his expertise in agronomy and works with ag retailers and consulting agronomists, and experience as a conservation planner for the Snohomish Conservation District in Washington State to identify barriers and develop innovative solutions to accelerate change. Leif grew up on a farm near Brookings, South Dakota, and has an agronomy degree from South Dakota State University. Next, we have Dennis Fuchs, who serves as the Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District Administrator since 1996. Dennis leads a team of 19 professional Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District staff and works with a 5-member board of supervisors to accomplish the organization's mission, which is to enhance soil, water, and natural resources necessary for productive and profitable agriculture, safe and affordable drinking water, and wildlife habitat for all Stearns County residents, businesses, and visitors. Lastly, we have Drew Kessler, who is the principal project manager with Houston Engineering Incorporated. He leads the company's water quality and agribusiness service sections. Prior to joining HEI, Drew worked as a scientist at the University of Minnesota, where he completed his PhD. In addition, Drew also serves as the vice chair of the Headwaters Agriculture Sustainability Partnership. And with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to our panelists.
Thanks, Mary. I'm Dennis Fuchs with the Stearns County Soil Water Conservation District, and I'd like to talk a little bit about a special project we got going on in central Minnesota. That's HASP. That stands for the Headwaters of Ag Sustainability Partnership, and the photo that you see here is actually a kickoff field day event for our ESMC project that Leif will be talking about later in the talk. We can move to the next slide. So HASP is the Headwaters of Ag Sustainability Partnership, and the mission is to deploy solutions that benefit the environment, the economic viability of farmers, and the vitality of our rural communities. Despite our efforts to align public, private, non-governmental organizations, or a desire to align the public and private non-governmental organizations, NGOs, we're also exploring the support of farmers while improving the environment. And also we want to incubate ideas and spin off projects. And the Conservation District is a key partner in this. If you look at some of the partners involved with the HASP, it includes the Soil Water Conservation District and Ag Centric, an entity that works with our local colleges and provides a lot of help for ag businesses and farmers. We also have our NGOs, which include the Nature Conservancy and the Environmental Initiative. We've got industry, which includes Houston Engineering, True Terrace, and Genta. And we also have our crop consultants, our ag retailers, our certified crop advisors. And very importantly, a very critical component of this is our farmers. And then we also have ag lenders and producer groups as part of our partnership. And the producer groups include Midwest Dairy and Minnesota Milk. And our ag lending partners include Compeer Financial. So HASP has several roles, and one is to implement. HASP will deliver farmer-led innovative solutions to accelerate continuous improvements on our environment. They also have a role in advising and incubating and evolving ideas and projects that benefit both agriculture and the environment. Also, we accelerate the development and implementation solutions that are aligned with the mission of HASP. And then also lead. HASP intends to be a trusted connection between farmers and the general public, providing collaborative, quantifiable environmental solutions and improvements today and tomorrow. And we have several programs that HASP has been involved with. First one is the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program. And that particular program has been kind of the baseline common denominator in a lot of our projects. The Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program provides farmers with the regulatory certainty once they are certified. Participation can also provide access to various cost share programs to help them implement additional conservation practices. Also, it provides an index on how well they're performing, similar to the Fieldprint calculator. And it also aligns very well with the calculators and other metrics they use to determine how well you're protecting our resources. The HASP has been involved with the aggregate impact, aggregating all the impacts of the various farms participating in the program. And also HASP does provide feedback on how to improve the program. And that information is shared with the Ag Water Quality Certification Advisory Committee. And then the role of the Conservation District is we have the farmer relationship. We do the conservation planning and provide the conservation program leadership with the farmer. And then we also support industry efforts with these sustainability tools.
And I'm Leif Fixen with TNC, and I'm going to talk about kind of our next little case study here. This project is called All Acres for Our Water. And it started with a conversation between TNC. So I work for the Nature Conservancy. For those of you who may not know who we are, we're a global nonprofit focused on promoting and implementing conservation kind of around the world. We operate in 74 countries. We have just under 4,000 employees. A big chunk of those are scientists. We're a science-based organization. So we focus a lot on preserving key areas. That was our traditional bread and butter of, okay, we want to protect this native grassland, or we want to protect this riparian area or restore this floodplain. And over the last 10 to 15 years now, we've really started to expand our ag program. So I function both at a national level with our ag program, kind of leading our farmer advisor strategy, as well as in a local role as the ag strategy manager for Minnesota, South Dakota, and North Dakota. And what I do in that role is I take more of those national big picture goals and I figure out ways to touch them down in really real projects and ways. And that's why I'm here to talk about this project, which involves a bunch of local partners. So back to All Acres for Our Water. So this project was initially kicked off by a recently retired CEO of a large, agribusiness company based here in Minnesota. And they said basically, hey, I've got a little more time here. I'd really like to dive more into the conservation side of ag. And he brought TNC together with the Minnesota Land Trust and said, I'll put up some money. You guys find a watershed and figure out what it's going to take to actually achieve basically the Gulf Hypoxia Task Force goal of a 20% reduction in nitrogen loading and a 27% reduction in phosphorus loading into the Mississippi River. From there, TNC and MLT kind of said, all right, well, where do we want to do this? And we all agreed that it would be really good to do this in the headwaters of the Mississippi. Minnesota's the birthplace of the Mississippi, and we take a lot of pride in both protecting and trying to improve that river. And so we kind of started looking north of the Twin Cities. And from there, we're like, okay, well, neither of us, are necessarily super interested in owning the relationship with farmers and those landowners. We're both kind of running in what we would call an influence strategy. And so we're like, okay, who's got good relationships with farmers in the headwaters? And very quickly, our list of areas to work in got shortened to the Stearns Soil and Water Conservation District. Dennis and his team and his board have done a really great job of really thinking progressively and investing in their staff and building relationships with farmers, which really made them an attractive partner for us, considering we didn't really want to own those relationships with the farmers. It's much better left to the folks that either already have those relationships or have that local experience and knowledge and kind of long-term investment in those relationships. And so from there, we all kind of said, all right, we want to pick a watershed that we can really get our arms around to see what it's actually going to take to get enough practices on the landscape to achieve that 20% reduction. And so for there, we started kind of shopping for Huck 12 watersheds, if you're familiar with that term. But basically, we found a watershed that was about 31,000 acres, had a good mix of both some progressive farmers that had started down their path of kind of conservation ag and soil health practices and water quality practices, as well as some folks that we needed to kind of accelerate their practices and some of the conservation systems on their farm. And so we found a watershed, and the other thing that we really wanted was a livestock component, because I think most of the folks that are at this meeting understand the value that a ruminant animal can have as it relates to making money off of some of the practices that we want to get in the landscape, both you know, from being able to turn a cover crop into a feed crop, as well as the potential that perennials on the landscape have as a feed value. So anyway, so we narrowed in on the Bacchus Lake watershed, and we started recruiting partners. First on the list was the Stearns SWCD, and very quickly we brought in a few other partners. And I'll show those on the next slide, but the overall theory of change that we wanted to test out and kind of prove and develop a roadmap for was this idea that, okay, let's look at an entire watershed, set some goals for it. So we already had the goal of water quality. And so let's look at the watershed and find those spots on the landscape that give us the biggest bang for our buck. And that includes both infield practices as well as edge of field practices. So think infield, so 4R nutrient stewardship and soil health practices. Edge of field, think grass waterways, think saturated buffers, think filter strips, think wetland restoration and kind of the working wetlands side of things. And that's really where our partner Minnesota Land Trust comes in, because they're set up to put easements on those properties so the farmer can continue to make some money off of that. Anyway, so where are those acres, those specific like half acres that give us the biggest bang for our buck for both infield and edge of field practices? That's that box on the left there, that focusing in on those high value, high return on investment type practices and parcels. And the second part of that is also setting up, okay, what are our goals? How many acres of soil health do we need to get? How many feet of grass waterways do we need to get? How many acres of wetlands do we need to get? So that was a big part of that. We set some goals. We identified some high value parcels to go after and stuff like that. And from there, we moved into the second part of our project's goal was both innovative outreach and innovative incentives. So the first part of that is, all right, we have a portion of the community that's already working with the SWCD. Let's make sure that all their needs are met. But then also, how do we get to some of those farmers that aren't necessarily walking in the door at the SWCD or NRCS and get them, reach them? And this is where our ag retail strategy kind of comes into play, and testing out ways that we can better work with them and set them up so that they can be a service provider as well, in the same way that Dennis's team does. So it's really kind of bringing all those different voices that a farmer is listening to and getting them working together. We've got a board member who talks about their agronomy team and how it's like 5 different people and 5 different companies, and they bring them together once a year. That was kind of the idea here, right? Like, how do we get the SWCD farm planner, the ag retail, salesperson, and potentially the ag lender and NRCS person all sitting down and kind of planning through conservation for a farm. The other part of that is incentives. So a big focus on finding and fine-tuning those economic tipping points for a farmer to say yes to testing out a new practice. And this includes environmental markets. We'll talk about ecosystem service markets next. And that pilot also kind of overlays this pilot. And it also kind of is looking at some innovative easements and or conservation rental type programs. And that's where our partner, the Minnesota Land Trust, comes in, as well as NRCS and the USDA programs. So, and then, ultimately the goal there is to accelerate the change on the landscape. Measure our impact through this process. We're basically going to use the same models that we used up front to kind of set goals and identify parcels. To dump our for those of you familiar in like construction, dump the as-builts in. So what did we actually get on the landscape? Dump that into those same models and figure out, hey, in theory, once these practices are fully established and cooking, are we going to get that 20% reduction or not? And we're really lucky in that donor that put up this money, put up a good chunk of money, was very comfortable and familiar with the challenge of kind of like how long it'll take for a lot of these practices to have the impact that they will have. With that, we can go to the next slide. And so, this is very much a partnership. Like I said before, TNC's not interested in, we have an influence strategy for our ag program, right? And that is, we want to work with the folks that already are the trusted advisors for farmers to kind of get our ideas and our strategies kind of impregnated into their business platform or their way of working. And so to do that, like we primarily partner with folks, and this is just some of the partners that we're involved with in this All Acres project. Kind of tying back into the HASP team, the two things that really offered us was a group of like-minded folks that was already established that we could go in and say, hey, we've got this idea, we've got this funding. Can you guys function as an advisory board for us? And it also helped us identify some potential partners to dive deeper into this project with. So HASP functions as our advisory committee and helps us troubleshoot and think through strategies and projects. And TNC and our partner, Minnesota Land Trust, we really focus in on project strategy and management. Again, another goal of our funder was that this thing needs to be scalable. We have enough money where we could probably just go in and buy our way out of this, project. 31,000 acres isn't a ton of land, but when we put that lens of scalability, on our approaches and our strategies and our programs, it prevents us from doing that. So a big goal is to make sure that this is a replicable approach, and it can be taken to other watersheds in both Minnesota and in other states. We kind of lead the fundraising side of things. Another goal for TNC and MLT was to leverage this funding. So to turn, $1 into 2 into 3 kind of a deal. So we've been writing grants and doing stuff like that. That allows the SWCD folks to really focus on what they do best, which is farm planning and getting farmers in the door. Another role here, and this is one that I learned from my time in the Pacific Northwest in Puget Sound, is functioning as that funding aggregator. As I think many of you are probably aware, reporting, especially on government grants, can be pretty time consuming, and so we function as kind of an aggregator of funds so that we just have one contract with the SWCD and simplifies things there. Partnership development, so bringing on new partners when appropriate, and then I already talked about the scalability. So with that, Dennis, I'll let you talk through those roles. Anything I've missed so far before you dive into roles?
I think you covered it pretty good, Leif. Thank you. And just looking at some of the conservation district roles, outreach is a major component that a lot of conservation districts have a active outlet for getting information out to landowners. And that could be social media, radio shows, press releases, and other tools, including field days. We have a great established farmer relationship. When farmers work with the local SWCD, they walk away with a great feeling that they have accomplished, and taken care of their farm and sustained it for the next generation. And they go to the local watering hole and share that with their friends and local farmers. And before you know it, we're building that network of farmers. Conservation planning, I mentioned that earlier with the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program. That is the program that really accelerates the conservation planning. It's a field by field, crop by crop analysis, looking at the tillage and nutrient impacts and any erosion and conservation practices already installed, and what kind of additional conservation practices could be added to your program to better improve your water quality index score. Incentive program management, there's a variety of cost share programs at the local, state, and federal level. The farmer doesn't need to figure all that stuff out. Once they are interested in proceeding with the project, we take care of a lot of those details, and they don't need to worry about that information. Sustainability tools support, there again, as we work with developing these tools, we also have opportunity for refinement, and we share that information with the creators of the tools to improve them. And also another thing that's kind of unique with the Stearns County Soil Water Conservation District, for the past 20 years, we've been doing crop advisor agronomist trainings to help them be aware of all of the soil and water management practices that may improve the farmers' profitability and protect the environment at the same time. And that's been a very great way to start developing that relationship with our ag retailers. Yep. Anything you could add to that, Leif?
Well, so, you know, I think your roles, that was perfect, Dennis. It's been, you guys have been a really great partner to work with on this. And it's, you know, we're somewhat stacking the deck a little bit working with you guys, but you know, these types of projects have enough challenges as is. So it's really nice having a good partner there. The other thing I'll plug, and this is a tie into what Lexi was talking about earlier, you know, so field to market. So the role that you're going to see field to market show up in a lot of these projects, and the benefit of using field to market and ultimately the Fieldprint calculator is that it's the tool that we're using to help kind of communicate the impact of in-field practices to the farmer and to our funders. So for all acres, we're using this as a way to aggregate our impact of in-field practices. So basically we're doing before and after snapshots using the Fieldprint calculator. And then we're aggregating all of that kind of up at the end of the project. And that's the same thing we're doing with, or Dennis is doing with the Ag Water Quality Certification Program. So a fun thing we're doing there is, so there's the Ag Water Quality Certification Program or project that Dennis talked about earlier. You know, that's really education and some farm planning. So we're doing that aggregate of impact or improvement right there. And we're doing the same thing in the all acres area, but we're doing it knowing that we're putting, you know, a few extra $1 million into a very small area. And so it allows us to kind of start looking at that return on investment question. So I hope I communicated that a way that makes sense. So it allows us what's the return on a light touch like Ag Water Quality Certification versus the return on like pouring some money into a small area gets us. So that's the role of field to market there. And anything to add there, Drew or Dennis?
I think you nailed it.
Yeah, so for those of you who are interested in a little bit more information on this project, we're going to show a quick video, kind of big picture ideas of what the project is. It's more farmer facing, but we'll put that on next. Also, there's a website you see on the screen down here, acresforwater.com. Again, scalability is the theme here, and so there's some resources on there that we'd be happy to share in a format that you can tweak to your local kind of districts and project areas. So with that, we'll play the video.
I think it was back in the 90s, the first time I no-tilled beans, and I was sweating bullets the whole time I was doing it. It's like partly worried about if it's gonna flop, but that's anything when you're trying to change or get better. I didn't have to buy 1,000 gallons fuel that first year, though. I mean, just think of that, it's been almost 15 years of that. Well, that's a fair amount of fuel not getting burned, much less the machines running and my time. And now I've got as good a yields as I've ever had, and I've increased my organic matter on top of keeping the water clean and all the other benefits.
Every farmer has their own definition of success, but I think overall everyone is looking for a way to be sustainable and yet get the bottom line that they're trying to reach. Sometimes it can make a producer very hesitant about going and trying some of these practices. We can help overcome some of those barriers, and we can start to identify where practices may fit financially for them.
One thing about agriculture, you can't be afraid to change.
What it will look like 100 years from now, we don't know that answer. But you have to evolve into that, and that's what makes you productive.
So the next kind of case study on kind of how how partnerships with SWCDs can really work for everybody involved is and tying back to HASP again is that group, during one of our meetings we got to talking about environmental markets, or ecosystem service markets. So think carbon, water quality trading, water quantity trading, stuff like that. And it very quickly in the room, we all like realized that this is something that we all care about quite a bit. And so it quickly moved up on our priority projects list. And about the same time that this discussion was happening inside of HASP, the Ecosystem Service Marketplace Consortium was starting to take off. And it just so happened that a lot of the folks that are in HASP are also members of ESMC. And so we're saying, this could be a spot where we could plug in and help pilot ESMC and test out this approach and kind of leverage this partnership that's already established and very quickly get a pilot up and running for ESMC. And that's exactly what we did. So we started talking with NRCS and a bunch of other partners and started doing some grant writing and reaching out to kind of supply chain partners and stuff like that. And we basically over the summer we were able to build out a pilot with a big thank you to NRCS for putting up some of that seed funding, as well as the sort of Department of Ag with their Ag Water Quality Certification program. They put up some in-kind match, and then TNC and the partners kind of put up even more match to get to that one-to-one match requirement that NRCS had. And we've got this pilot up and running now. So the big goal of the pilot is to work with landowners to leverage existing conservation funding. So existing cost share programs, work that's already being done in our kind of so for the All Acres project, that's a Huck 12, so 31,000 acres. For the ESMC pilot, we're focusing on a broader watershed, the Sauk River watershed, to test out the ESMC platform. We're going to be working towards tradable carbon credits and tradable water quality credits, as well as kind of those, for those of you familiar, the scope 3 kind of inset carbon type credits as well. Inside of ESMC, we've got a bunch of partners. These are kind of the primary ones. We kind of lump folks into active partner and a support, but basically you're an so active partner and advocates. So active partners is you've agreed to either fund or take on a very specific part of the project. And so these are our active partners, and then we've got a list of probably 15 advocates in addition to these folks. Big part of this is outreach. Next part is fieldwork. So how do we actually get the data from the farms? How do we get the soil testing done? Platform integration. So how do we, for those farms that are already on field to market, their Fieldprint calculator, how can we seamlessly and easily get that data off of that platform and into the ESMC platform? All this helps get kind of overhead down and makes it cheaper to do the credit, leaving more money for the farmer. A big part of this is farm economics. More and more we're finding that we're looking at like a $5 to $10 an acre incentive here. So in addition to standing up a marketplace for some of these ecosystem services, we need to make sure that we're able to communicate the full value of a conservation practice or soil health practice. So that enterprise accounting for the farm. Market demand. So we're working with some of our partners here in Minnesota to develop and recruit buyers for the marketplace that's going to be launched in 2022, as well as bring on, we call them sponsors or however you want to label them, but folks that are looking for opportunities to get some some carbon mitigation in their supply chain. And then the last part is research. So, we've got a target of 50,000 acres enrolled in our pilot. We're going to be collecting soil data and a bunch of other data on that. And so how can we leverage that resource to either forward, soil health outcomes or, kind of edge of field practice stuff. So, and I want to clarify there that data won't be used unless we get the explicit consent from the farmer. So this isn't a backdoor into getting farmer data. The farmer will be fully aware of what's happening there. So overall, TNC is kind of the local project lead working with ESMC, and then HASP is our project advisor. And so we can go to the next slide here, actually. And so, HASP is really helping us set the strategy for the project. Again, I already talked about this. Recruit partners, established group already ready to go was made that step really easy. Market development, funding. So, the HASP team membership, that was really great. I don't think I've turned in too many grants where I had 18 letters of support and I was able to get them in a couple days. That was really nice being able to send one email to that HASP group and get a bunch of letters of support back. Platform integration, we talked about that. Disseminating results. So here's a value that I think TNC and some of the other larger partners in HASP bring to the table, in that we're involved in projects all over the country and around the world, and so we can kind of bring that and leverage those other projects for these local projects. So that's one of the roles TNC has, and then one of the other big roles is kind of identifying barriers and helping develop ways to overcome those barriers. So again, I'll ask you, Dennis, did I miss anything big there? And you can talk about the rules.
Did a great job, Leif. And just talking about the conservation district role, you're looking at the farmer relationships again, identifying folks that would like to participate in the ESMC project. Conservation planning, once again, we use the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification assessment process to develop the protocols, I should say, to collect the information that's needed for the Fieldprint calculator and these other metrics, so that we can quickly see where they're sitting at and where we need additional conservation applied on the landscape. We also help with the data collection and platform support. As I mentioned earlier, we're trying to get these programs to talk to one another so that it's a lot less work for the people doing the assessment. And also, if these protocols talk to one another, these application programming interfaces, it'll accelerate a lot of the information that can be shared with the stakeholders. Also, we can participate in soil testing. This past year, we were under a crunch because it was a pilot project and we wanted to get some soil samples collected for the ESMC project, and we assisted with the soil testing on these farmers' fields that are participating in the project.
And I'm just looking at this. The other thing that is really important is the cost share component, and that's your normal business, but it's such an important component of our pilot because this is a marketplace that will be launched in 2 years. We don't have that guarantee right now. There's some risk there, and the cost share programs that Stearns SWCD has been able to get in place and has been implementing, that helps de-risk that agreement with ESMC. In that, we're going to get some financial support there, and if we get some credits sold in 2 years, even better. So that's really important. And the other thing on here that I think is really important, these data, some of these data platforms are definitely more complicated and cumbersome than others. And I think, I don't like to use the word hand holding, but it's almost the best way to say it, right? Like helping these, if you have one of the farm planners on at the SWCD, they're already trained up on this. It just makes it that much easier for a farmer to kind of navigate this whole, digital platform process. So it's extremely important role. And so kind of with that, So we talked a little bit about enterprise accounting and the return on investment of different practices. And so this portfolio of projects are all connected, and some of that was by design and some of that was somewhat accidental, but or opportunistic. But Drew is going to talk about our we call it the ROI project, but that's the last case study we have on the list here. So.
Thanks, Leif. As Leif mentioned, I am Drew, and the final project I'll be talking about, and so this is the third or the fourth in the list that we've highlighted today, is an ROI project. And it's a little different than the other ones in that this is a project that HASP is leading. So you saw some of the different roles that HASP, our partnership, holds through the projects that have been highlighted today. The first one was implementing the egg water certification program. The next one was advising on the All Acres project that Leif highlighted. We were listed as accelerating the ESMC pilot, and this is a project where our partnership is leading this return on investment study. And the general goal of it, and it, as Leif mentioned, and he's spot on, it is kind of interconnected to those other efforts, because what we're doing is we're doing a very farm-specific assessment on the financial performance of farms using AgCentric, which is a university extension system. So our participating farms actually take a college credit to go and do an enterprise assessment on their financial performance for a year. And what we're doing is we're comparing side by side the financial performance along with some of these environmental programs that we've been talking about today, like the Egg Water Quality Certification Program, the Fieldprint Platform from Field to Market, and now with ESMC, Ecosystem Services Marketplaces as well too. So the intent of this is that we have a very diverse group of partners, including private sector, public sector, NGOs, and most importantly, farmers, where we can take some very focused looks and kind of explore this idea of, if conservation is adopted, is it a good financial outcome for the farmer? And that's truly what we're trying to get at with this study. So we are just wrapping up our first 2 years of data. I think in the Q1 of 2021, we're going to have some finalized results for the first 2 years of our study that we'll be releasing shortly. But in general, what we're hoping to, as I mentioned, showcase is this idea of environmental metrics, so changes in, an actual resource, like changes in carbon sequestration or improvements in water quality, alongside the farm financial performance for that year and over the course of several years. So this really started off with a focus in our year one on dairy farms, which is a bit of a unique aspect to our project. So there's projects like this that are kind of popping up across the nation. I think we got a bit of a unique angle here in that our year one study really focused initially on dairy farmers. So we wanted to look at some of the conservation practices associated with dairy farms, how that impacted farm financial performance, and how environmental outcomes were changed, or how continued progress was made based upon metric calculations and things like the Fieldprint calculator and the Egg Water Quality Certification Program. Now, as our partnership has gotten engaged in more projects like the forthcoming ESMC pilot that TNC is leading, we're going to get a chance to expand this study and add in more farms and take a look at how adding in payments for ecosystem services through this pilot approach influence farm financial performance, as well as I mentioned, again, always the connection between the two, environmental outcomes through calculators like Fieldprint Platform, Egg Water Quality Certification, and with ESMC coming in, also looking at metrics being calculated for ecosystem services. And so, if you're not familiar with some of these sustainability programs, you might be hitting a point where you're getting a little overwhelmed with the number of different tools we're using. And there are a lot of them out there. But the great part of how our partnership has been functioning is we are working together with tools that are already in place and accepted locally, like Minnesota Egg Water Quality Certification Program, and tools that harmonize well with other tools like the Fieldprint Platform, which aligns nicely right alongside Egg Water Quality Cert. And we're also exploring these innovative new marketplaces, really, and that's what they are, through things like ecosystem services. So we're really trying to explore this space where these tools are aligning with each other, finding benefits for the farmer that also document continuous improvement in the environment, rather than kind of seeing these things as, you know, one pitted against each other. And I think we're starting to see a lot of success in that space as we're seeing, you know, each one of these things we're exploring in terms of environmental metrics are contributing to the information we're pulling together for these projects. And with that, I can move on to the next slide, please. And so a little more specifics on roles. So as I mentioned, HASP is really leading the completion of this study, and you're seeing just a few of the key partners there. If you're interested, go back to the earliest slide that Dennis went over, where you see our full list of partners. HASP is also responsible for communicating the results. So our partnership as a whole is going to come together in developing the reporting and communication outcomes for this and be pushing that information out. And then as part of that, also supporting the partners involved in this. I didn't get it onto this slide, but I do just want to mention quickly the funding for this ROI study. We've received from some generous support as a group from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, from Compure Financial, and also most recently we'll be engaged in the TNC project for so NRCS as well. And Leif, Dennis, I don't think I missed anyone in that grouping, at least to date, did I? Oh, and Dairy Business Association, Dairy Edge Business Association as well too. So they're worth mentioning as well. Did I miss anything on the ROI study, guys? Dennis, you want to jump in and kind of speak to the role the Conservation District is playing in this ROI study?
Sure, thanks, Drew. The Conservation District, once again, it provides the farmer relationship. You know, we've got a lot of folks we're working with, and we just reach out to these folks and ask, would you like to participate on this return on investment study? And of course, we identify folks that we've got a good working relationship with, and is just a perfect role for a Conservation District to play in doing these types of pilot projects, is to be that liaison and take the partnership in the district and the farmer and bring them together. And you really can do a lot at the local level. The conservation program leadership, from implementing conservation practices to improving their return on investment, to just making sure that the programs are moving forward. And one thing that with these different programs is you got to have stuff validated and make sure things are being done that is being said that's going to be done. So that's another role that we're playing. And then also we support the efforts with the sustainability tools. And like Drew mentioned, there is a lot of tools out there. And we have some staff that have been familiar with the assessment component with the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification, Fieldprint Calculator, the Truterra tool, and they're really seeing areas where we can make some improvement and make these tools work better. And we're sharing that with Drew and Houston Engineering and the other folks that are developing these tools to make them a lot more efficient. And a lot more farmers will be willing to participate, and conservation districts willing to take that role if these tools can be refined somewhat and the ease of use improves over time. So just a lot of opportunity for conservation districts with our partnerships.
As we move forward into this discussion, I just really wanted to dig into just a few of those hard-hitting questions that Field to Market gets from our members about what roles conservation districts can play in projects. The biggest thing for me is understanding in that design phase, how can conservation districts play a role in identifying those key areas to go to ground? Field to Market's project framework that I mentioned earlier does focus on locally led conservation efforts being the key component to identifying where conservation and where our project should go to ground. And with that, I know Drew from Houston Engineering, working alongside Leif and Dennis, trying to understand in that all acres, what are those key watersheds? So Drew, I know Houston played a role in that. So I thought that would be really helpful to understand how Houston helped identify those key watersheds for each of these projects.
Perfect, thank you, Lexi. So the way Houston kind of got involved in the Sauk area was through the initial formation of HASP, the Headwaters Agricultural Sustainability Partnership that we've been talking about. And we sat down with Steve Peterson, who's retired from General Mills and was actually one of the individuals who helped start Field to Market originally. And we were kind of kicking around the idea of trying to form a private-public partnership to look at some of these ideas. And we quickly landed on the SOC area for some of the reasons that were actually mentioned by Leif and TNC, which they arrived at similar for setting up their projects, is they had a very active soil and water conservation district in Stearns SWCD. So for us, that was a key partner in pulling this thing off. An interesting thing in this space, a lot of the times these partnerships are set up by the private sector supply chain. We didn't have that in place here when we got going. We instead came through a slightly different pathway by working directly with a conservation district that had a lot of the relationships in place that we needed. So that was kind of the driver for us selecting the SOC watershed.
Thanks, Drew. That's really helpful. I know one of the biggest things that I think makes HASP unique is the number of partnerships. So Dennis, I know working with a board and understanding how do you get that buy-in from the staff and the board to really take on a project like this? How has Stearns County Soil and Water District really pulled that together and works with those relationships?
We've got a very progressive board of supervisors in Stearns County, and they understand the value of the consumer demanding greater sustainability, and our farmers would like to continue on the pathway of increased sustainability. But there are risks associated with some of these practices, like cover crops. You don't know for sure if you plant in a corn soybean rotation, if they're always going to germinate, if you're doing it later in the fall in the northern climate like Minnesota. So this just gives them an opportunity to bring some of that value back for the effort that the farmer is providing, the field to market type of value. So our board has been very supportive of the work that we're doing and encourage other locally elected officials and federal representatives to continue to support. And then working with entities like the Nature Conservancy and Houston Engineering, Drew's firm, has just been fantastic. The whole partnership of HASP has been so supportive with the common goal of helping protect the environment and sustain our farmers. And they're also just a great bunch of people. We really like to get together and innovate and think of new ideas on how can we push the envelope, how can we do a better job. And sometimes that might take a beer or two to get there, but it is just a lot of fun.
And Leif, I had one last question for you from the Nature Conservancy perspective, and being that influencer and taking on that role. I know actually in our wrap-up slide, we'll touch on this a little bit as well with Dennis, but how has that influence strategy really brought partnerships together for you across this project and other projects that you support across the U.S.?
Well, I'd say it kind of really falls into two different, pathways or strategies. Part of this is Dennis, the Stearns SWCD, because of that board, because of Dennis's leadership for his team and the team that he's developed, we don't need to influence at all there, right? Like our goal is to test out ideas and figure out ways that we can replicate the Stearns SWCDs, in other parts of the country. And then so there's that. So there's working with folks like Stearns to test out new ideas and approaches. And then there's the kind of the spreading that roadmap kind of strategy in partnership. So how do we identify other possible weak down approach? That makes sense?
Absolutely. So as I think through field to market, my goal as a program director is to be that influencer as well alongside our members like the Nature Conservancy, knowing that we can't start those projects on our own, but helping our members set up those projects for success. And for me, one of those key partners is always our conservation districts, but not everything is simple and easy. So Dennis, if you'll walk us through our last slide here of the opportunities and barriers that you've been able to tackle from the conservation district from your conservation district, but also with that thought through other in that larger scale? What are some of those other potentials if you don't already have those relationships?
Sure. Thanks, Lexi. Yeah, so if you look at some of the opportunities and barriers for conservation districts, one of the opportunities that we have and that we already have established at a lot of conservation districts is that connection with the motivated landowner. The folks that you've already implemented conservation practices with, having that network of folks that would be willing to participate in pilot programs like ESMC or the return on investment, those types of connections are huge, and there's a lot of value in having that connection. Another thing is, having the capacity to provide the conservation planning and technical assistance. We have a staff of 19 folks in the Stearns SWCD. Not all of them are out in the field, but a majority of them are. But we do have the capacity to do the conservation planning and implementation with our producers. And in Stearns County, we have over 3,000 farmers. So we do have a tremendous workload in our county. But if you're not at that capacity, you need to work on that. And there's several ways to do that. And that'd be worthwhile to have another talk on that. Another potential source of funding for landowners to implement conservation practices. That's where if they're getting $10 to $15 an acre, that helps cover the cost of some of the conservation practices that they're implementing on their farm. Also, it takes many partners to tackle the task. Because you have so many partners, it may take a little more time and effort to stay coordinated. And I like to say that might take a little more beer, and that's a good deal. That's not a problem. I definitely enjoy trying to stay coordinated. The other thing is when you start working with new partners, there can be sometimes turf issues, but you can a lot of times overcome those problems by identifying and defining your roles. Like the Nature Conservancy, they're not here to develop that local landowner relationship. They're here to help coordinate on a much higher level. And that has just been a fantastic partnership. And with Drew and Houston Engineering, they're here to help coordinate the tools. We're not a person that can create models and all of these application programming interfaces. That's where the engineering firms need to really assist us. And then if you look at some of the success and failures with partners, you really need to share that. I love saying that it was the Stearns SWCD that did it. But really, it's our partnership, and it's everyone that's working on the team. And one of the first slides I showed with HASP was a bunch of partners, and all of them is what makes this program successful. And conservation districts need to be willing to share that success and failures. I mean, sometimes things go bad, and if it's my fault, I have to admit it. And that's something that we need to share too. And the other thing is, in order to be successful, you really need your board and staff support. And I'm very fortunate. We've got a great team, very passionate conservationists on our team. I've got a SWCD board that's very progressive and very supportive of accomplishing our conservation mission using new and innovative tools, such as the things talked about today. So those are some of the opportunities and barriers, and I hope every conservation district takes time to check it out. And if you do have questions, there'll be an opportunity for us to help answer those down the road.
Lexi, I think you're on mute.
Thanks, Dennis. Definitely was on mute. So we have that beautiful Zoom moments that everybody has these days. But I really want to thank all of our speakers for joining today. It has been a tremendous effort through this HASP project of standing it up, finding those pilots and finding partners that I just love that we have found a way that from field to market's perspective, I can amplify the work that you're doing, but also share these experiences. Being that clearinghouse, so this is how conservation happens and sustainability is spread across the U.S. So I really am thankful that I got to celebrate your project today, and I'm really appreciative of everyone joining us to really dive a little bit deeper and try to understand really from a real life experience, how can you drive that conservation and sustainability effort at the field level? So with that, I want to thank you, and we'll turn it back over to Mary.
Well, thank you everyone for presenting today. The session was absolutely wonderful. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure there's a lot of opportunities for conservation districts to get involved. And with that, I would just like to remind everyone to go back out to the main agenda, and you'll be able to see the next set of sessions. Thank you very much.